All right, I want to welcome in our panel on this Wednesday morning. We start with our White House correspondent, Emerald Robinson, down in our nation's capital. The former Lieutenant Governor of New York, Betsy McCoy, is here. And Project 21 National Advisory Board member and conservative radio host Christopher Arps is with us in sunny downtown St. Louis on this Wednesday.
Always.
Well, I want to talk about this most recent shooting. We had a tragedy in Colorado a day ago. Every time this happens, gun control becomes an issue again in Washington. It's clear that the Biden administration now might just have the votes to do something. Here's Joe Biden talking about his plans. We'll play this, then we'll get some reaction. Take a listen.
The Senate should immediately pass. Let me say it again. The United States Senate, I hope some are listening, should immediately pass the two House-passed bills that close loopholes in the background check system. These are bills that receive votes of both Republicans and Democrats in the House. This is not and should not be a partisan issue. This is an American issue. It will save lives, American lives.
Emerald, I'd like to start with you. We just found out that Newsmax will be at the press conference tomorrow at the White House, day number 64 for Joe Biden. You know, we were talking about this 9 days ago. We didn't know what the news cycle would be by the time March 25th rolled around, and here we go. We know this will likely be a very big topic in the briefing room tomorrow.
Well, it's certainly a topic he'll want to talk about above others, correct? Because this is exactly what they want to push is gun control. He quickly moved from talking about the tragedy of the situation in Colorado immediately to the gun control and a push for gun control. I mean, extremely quickly in his address yesterday, suggesting we don't know much about that shooter. But, you know, when we did find out more about who the shooter is, his name is, Ahmad al-Issa, we heard a lot less about the shooter.
Yeah.
And I have word, and it's Chicago when it comes to gun control.
No, Chicago and New York. According to the New York Times, violent crime involving guns in New York's up 18% over a year ago. The suspect, Ahmad al-Issa, 21 years old, born in Syria, immigrated here to the U.S. when he was 3 years old. His brother called him, quote, deeply disturbed. And Betsy, I'll direct this at you. You know, last week it was all about the media narrative being that the shooter in Atlanta was a white supremacist and that he was on, you know, some anti-Asian rampage. The FBI says so far that's not the case. Local police say that's not the case. Relatives of the victims have said that's not the case. And now fast forward a week, we've got a Muslim immigrant using an AR-style rifle, and the media narrative immediately shifts back to gun control.
That's right. And first, let me point out that almost nothing in the Atlanta narrative was true or provable. It was completely concocted for partisan purposes. It wasn't a racist event, according to the police. It wasn't inspired by Donald Trump. And fortunately, although even one racist crime against Asians is too many, a racist crime of any sort is unacceptable. Asian crimes against Asians are usually committed, or more often committed, by blacks than by whites. So it certainly wasn't a white supremacy crime. But getting to this event, this tragic event that happened yesterday, it should be up to the states to enact gun control, because what's needed or acceptable in New York or Chicago is not so much in Maine or Texas. And states can learn a lot from each other watching this. Colorado, for example, I was listening to a state senator from Colorado yesterday who's been an ardent gun control advocate. She lost her own son in a mass shooting in Colorado. And yet she has come to the conclusion that it's more about the person than the gun. She said, we already passed laws to limit the size of the magazine, for example. There are some very constructive gun laws, anti-kid gun laws, anti-theft gun laws.
Betsy, I want to bring in Chris Arps here when you talk about the actual guns themselves. So this guy, the suspect, Ahmad al-Issa, he bought this gun legally, Chris, about a week ago. Looks like 8 days ago he was able to buy this gun legally. But it looks like in 2018 he was charged with a felony, third-degree assault. My question, why would he be able to buy a gun if he had a felony on his record? Shouldn't that have been a red flag right there?
That's a complete red flag. When you go in to do your background test, They're supposed to flag that if you have any felonies that won't allow you to purchase a gun. You know, Rob, we see this every time that we have one of these mass shootings. The Democrats call for draconian Second Amendment curtailments. Every time that they propose these proposals, they would not have stopped the crime that happened. What the Democrats ultimately want, they won't admit it, is the prohibition of guns. And we've seen with alcohol prohibition that prohibiting a product that people want does not work. These mass shootings are a symptom of a deeper ill within our society, and taking away guns from law-abiding citizens is just not the answer.
Chris, great point. I want to play a soundbite from Ted Cruz yesterday. He was quick to respond to the Democrats' calls for gun rights. Take a listen.
Every time there's a shooting, we play this ridiculous theater where this committee gets together and proposes a bunch of laws that would do nothing to stop these murders.
All right, I want to welcome in the president for Americans for Tax Reform, Grover Norquist, joining us bright and early here on Wake Up America. Grover, nice to see you. I'm sure you just heard the senator speaking there. It does seem like Democrats are eager to exploit this type of violence whenever it fits their narrative. This was not the case just 1 week ago with those shootings, those tragic shootings in Atlanta.
Yes, they're interested in moving a political narrative forward. Right now, they're looking to push gun control. Remember, Biden ran saying he wanted to have a $200 tax on every American with a rifle, with a semi-automatic rifle, which semi means not automatic. Sometimes our friends on the left who don't know anything about guns think it's an automatic weapon. Semi-automatic means you pull the trigger once, it goes off once. It's not a machine gun. It is what people use to hunt. It is what people use for self-defense. And there are tens of millions of such rifles. The president says he wants to have a $200 tax every year for you to own a gun. Okay? You can sell it to the government, which is what they want you to do. They want to take your gun. But you have to fill out a 13-page form, give them your address, give them your picture, give them your fingerprints, so that they can come someday and take your gun, as was done in Britain, in Australia, in New York City. And this is an effort to eliminate the Second Amendment of the Constitution. This is not some law they want to change, but a $200 tax. Of course, that violates the president's promise that he would never tax anyone who earned less than $400,000. There are tens of millions of Americans who have a normal rifle for hunting, for self-protection, right. And the president would make that a $200 tax to own that every year. You know, if we taxed newspapers in order to have more control of newspapers and eventually take them away, people would immediately recognize this as a violation of the First Amendment. I think what the president wants is unconstitutional, but it's of a piece.
Grover, you bring up a really good point. I wasn't going to do this, but Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana made a point that basically supports exactly what you're saying yesterday. I thought it was a perfect way to describe what we just saw. While tragic, this is something that can be prevented. Take a listen to the senator of Louisiana.
You don't stop drunk drivers by getting rid of all sober drivers, which is what many of my Democratic friends want to do with respect to the Second Amendment. In my judgment, we do not need more gun control. We need more idiot control.
Grover, does that work for you? Idiot control works for me.
We don't take cars away because people can misuse cars.
Right.
It really is the left's agenda. It makes no sense. Remember, they used to go against handguns, and they said, oh, we'll never go for rifles that people hunt with. Every time there's a target of opportunity, they move against the Second Amendment, and it's really disgusting.
We didn't see it a week ago. And by the way, you could apply this to the coronavirus as well. This is the first time in history that we've quarantined the healthy, but that's what's happening right now. One more point on this, Emerald. You brought up the murder rates going up in cities across America. In St. Louis, Chris, by the way, in New York and Chicago, they're up they're 18% in New York and 22% in Chicago year over year. That's from the New York Times. In Portland, Oregon, legal gun buys have gone up over 20% year over year. Do you think that any of this has to do with that whole defund the police movement, Emerald, that we saw over the summer?
You mean people buying more guns? Certainly.
Yeah.
I went to the gun store here in Arlington, and people were just lined around the block, and not the usual people you would think. I mean, I saw so many women of color who are clearly concerned about their safety buying guns. And I also want to say to this Boulder situation, what also doesn't fit the narrative and that we haven't seen a lot of yet, I think we should in the next 24 hours, is the alleged anti-Trump post that this shooter had posted on social media. Also, There's the question of if he was possibly on the FBI radar. There's reports that an accomplice of his or a friend of his was. So again, it's just like in some of the other situations, the shooter situations, shouldn't this have been on the FBI radar? And is this not yet another breakdown of not looking at the person in advance and could have been prevented?
Yeah, it's a very good point. Last week we had a white supremacist, 21-year-old, that did that shooting in Georgia. This week it's an anti-Trump supporter, but the media immediately has shifted the narrative, and I just think it was laughable to watch this play out yesterday because it didn't fit with what they want to do. So they shifted the narrative. Panel, we got a lot to get into today. Really enjoyed it. Grover, good seeing you. We'll see you guys again at the top of the hour.